Hello and welcome to the Discover History YouTube channel, and this evening I would like to wish a very happy birthday to King Charles II, and I would also like to say to everyone happy Oak-Apple Day. Now, we've been asking people to take photographs of themselves wearing oak leaves and then comment on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, or even on here, with the little hashtag of Oak-Apple360. And there's a reason for that, because today marks the 360th anniversary of the first ever Oak-Apple Day, the day when everyone is meant to be wearing oak leaves, and it's really important that you wear these leaves with pride. Now, the story actually stems back further than 1660. So in this video, for about 12 to 15 minutes, we're going to try our hardest to tell you what Oak-Apple Day is and why it's celebrated. And the story starts on the late summer's afternoon on the 3rd of September 1651. It was that fateful day of the Battle of Worcester. Charles had brought a Scottish army, often referred to as an invading Scotch army, from across Scotland all the way down, heading towards London. They didn't get to London, they were actually stopped in the Midlands. In particular, they ended up getting stopped at Worcester. Meanwhile, Oliver Cromwell, who had sent some of the men to shadow the Royalist army south, had also amassed 30,000 men. So it was a huge battle. The Battle of Worcester was fought all day. Some people say it began during a thunderstorm at around about 6 a.m. when Parliament forces started to advance from Upton. And the battle went right into the evening. But around about 7 o'clock, interestingly, Charles fled from Worcester Cathedral. Now, despite leading a few attacks, and he wasn't the greatest of leaders, unlike Oliver Cromwell, Charles eventually watched most of the battle from the cathedral tower. So he left the cathedral tower, famously rode his horse down Friar Street in New Street, and eventually even had to take his armour off and crawl underneath a wagon to do the last leg to the Sheriff of Worcester's house. Now, the Sheriff of Worcester's house today is known as King Charles's house because that's where Charles stayed. Some people believe that is probably the Royalist headquarters at the Battle of Worcester. Now, you're probably thinking, well, the commandery is the headquarters of the Battle of Worcester. Well, technically it's not. It was the Duke of Hamilton's billet and the Duke of Hamilton's, in a way, divisional headquarters. So not quite the overall headquarters for the Battle of Worcester. Now, famously, Charles went through the front door, grabbed a few belongings and mounted a horse in the back doorway, which is on the Corn Market. And famously, he galloped out through St. Martin's Gate, the only gate not in enemy hands at that point, and went north. Now, this is where Oak-Apple Day originates from. So the 3rd of September 1651, Charles leaves that billet, that house in the Corn Market, and he goes on the run. Now, his escape route is quite a long one. The actual escape route went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. Charles was on the run for 6 whole weeks. Now, the interesting fact, he headed north. His army came from Scotland. He was, after all, a Stuart king, so he assumed he could get back up into the north. As he went north, he realised the Parliament forces had not only won at the Battle of Worcester, but there was a scattering of troops dotted around in the north. So he didn't actually get that far north. In the end, he ended up in Shrewsbury, in Shropshire as well, and he ended up in Boscobel House. Now, Boscobel House today is owned by English Heritage, and whilst he was at Boscobel House with the Pendrell family, they were the ones that were worried that whilst he was stopping there for the night, he may get caught. In other words, soldiers were searching homes of royalists, they were searching homes of famous Catholics, for example. They thought they would grab the king on his major escape. Anyway, it was at that point that Charles decided, and his entourage, shall we say, that the safest place for him was to go outside into the nearby forest. And famously, he crawled right at the top to a nearby oak tree, a mighty oak, which, remember, in September time it would have been full of leaves. In particular, famously, these oak leaves. So it was the oak leaves that would have saved the king, because at that point, when Parliament soldiers were searching the area, they would not have looked up. People generally don't. Now, Samuel Pepys had the story narrated to him by Charles later on in history, and it was said at one point Charles was starving when he was at the top of the tree, because Parliament soldiers had got themselves a rabbit and they were roasting it below, and Charles was up the tree starving as these Parliament soldiers were tucking into a nice roasted rabbit. Now, the escape didn't end there. 6 weeks he went on the run. From Boscobel, he then realised that he had to keep on the move, and then eventually he headed south, because he thought if he can't get back to Scotland, he would go back across into France and all the other countries down there and live as a foreign monarch. He went south, ended up in Somerset. We know famously from Samuel Pepys's narration of the story, Charles actually hid in Wiltshire at the top of the Stonehenge monument, actually on top of the stones. But then eventually on the coastline, he was promised several times that they would be able to get him onto a boat and back across into Europe. It didn't work, which then meant he had a long route along the south coast until he gets down to Shoreham, and from Shoreham he then got away into France, and then he stayed in exile. Now, at that point, Oliver Cromwell stamped his foot across Britain, because obviously we were now a republic. There was no monarchy, there was no Charles, there was definitely no Charles I, who had been executed in 1649. And even saying the word royalist or saying the word king or Charles could get you into a lot of trouble. Now, Cromwell's republic went all the way through until 1658. It does go beyond that, by the way. But in 1658, famously, Oliver Cromwell dies. Very spooky story coming. Oliver Cromwell died on the 3rd of September 1658. Interesting fact, the Battle of Worcester was fought on the 3rd of September 1651. Some people say that Cromwell met the devil one day and asked for 2 victories. It's weird, because on the 3rd of September 1650 there was the Battle of Dunbar. 3rd of September 1651 was the Battle of Worcester. It's odd how Oliver Cromwell dies on the 3rd of September. So did he make a pact with the devil? We will never ever know. But eventually, after Cromwell's death, his son took over. And here he is here. This is the younger Cromwell, and he takes command and was nicknamed Tumbledown Dick. He was more interested in gardening. He actually wrote a gardening book. And basically this country was starting to become an embarrassment. A lot of the older generals, a lot of the troops even that had fought during the Civil War, thought that Britain was starting to look a bit of a joke, and they were getting very, very annoyed. Eventually we get some famous people like George Monk coming along, a famous soldier, a very experienced man, and it's people like that that put into motion bringing back the monarchy. Let's bring back the monarchy. We've trialled the republic. It hasn't really worked. You need a strong leader. Cromwell was, but his son wasn't. And then in the end, after the gears were put into motion, on the 29th of May 1660, Charles marched through the streets of London with great cheers. Now at that point, Worcester was having to hide its disloyalty. Now we always say Worcester is the faithful city, and the weird thing is we could do a whole video that would last probably about 6 hours just on this topic. But famously on the 3rd of September 1651, any Worcester people, any Worcester men shall we say, that hadn't fled to Beverly Island decided to join the Parliament army to liberate their city. The army of occupation, these royalist Scots, were looting, they were burning and damaging the city, and the Battle of Worcester caused great damage. So very simply, most of the menfolk of Worcester joined the Parliament army. We have to be quiet about that one. But the funny thing is, our city in 1660 tried to hide this fact that we were disloyal, and what they decided to do is Worcester was one of the first cities to send a letter to the king announcing that they're ready to serve him. Worcester was that loyal city. Even later on, when you get to the 1700s, we have the Guildhall rebuilt, and famously, as I told you about in a previous video, we have Charles II statue there. We look like a royalist city. We have a great motto of the faithful city. And the interesting thing is, by the 19th century, Oakapple Day became a public holiday, a true public holiday, where we had time off, very much like a bank holiday weekend, and people celebrated it. Samuel Pepys actually said in 1660, we must ensure that we celebrate Oakapple Day every single year. Now, Worcester used to do a very special thing. We actually decorated the railings, the famous 19th century railings of the Guildhall. Now, I was given a number of documents and a number of photographs relating to Oakapple Day. This is a photograph from the 1930s that actually shows the Mayor of Worcester putting oak leaves around the railing arch of the Guildhall. It's not the only thing. Worcester citizens used to party, there was banquets at the Guildhall, and most of the citizens of Worcester would have been wearing the oak leaf. The funny thing is, in other cities it's sometimes called Nettle Day, it's sometimes called Pinch Bum Day, and that's because it was traditional that if you were caught without the oak leaves, you could have your bottom pinched, or you could be beaten with a bundle of stinging nettles. Now, we know that the Guildhall oak leaves used to come from the Croom estate, and I say that because we have a letter pertaining to that fact here. I also like to add, in 1936 the Mayor read out this famous speech. Today is Oakapple Day. On his restoration to the throne of his ancestors in the year 1660, King Charles II, who had fled from England after the fateful Battle of Worcester in 1651, ordered that as a token of gratitude to the citizens of Worcester for their faithfulness to the royalist cause, bit of a joke, they should celebrate his birthday, the 29th of May, as Oakapple Day, a symbol of the oak at Boscobel in which he hid from Cromwell's Ironsides and his miraculous escape. For many years after his restoration, the citizens thus faithfully kept the birthday of their king by proudly wearing oak leaves and oak apples and the hanging of oak bows from their household doors. It is a pity, and this is the interesting thing in the 1960s, it is a pity that this happy custom is forgotten during the stress of modern times, 1930, but fitting that the corporation, the council, responsible for the well-being of the city should keep evergreen this memory of their king by placing oak bows at the entrance to the seat of local government, and so renew every year its loyalty to the throne. God save the king and the faithful city. And this was a speech that was read out at the Guildhall in 1936. So Worcester celebrates Oakapple Day with style, and since that date, really, we should always celebrate it. Problem is, by the 1990s, these so-called modern times that's mentioned in the speech got even busier, and slowly the council forgot about it. Until 2003, when Discover History was founded, we brought back the tradition. We brought Oakapple Day back to Worcester, and it's still celebrated right up to this day. Despite the COVID-19 lockdown, we're still celebrating it. How are we doing it? Take a photo, a selfie with you wearing oak leaves, share it on our Facebook, Twitter and Instagram with the hashtag Oakapple360. After 360 years, Worcester is still celebrating it. On that note, stay safe, have a little drink tonight, and see you tomorrow. Bye.